Hello and welcome to Eco-Terrorism. I'm Zeinab Bailoun. What made the United States military use chemical weapons so extensively during the Vietnam War? Most prominent of these weapons was Agent Orange, the consequences of which continue to affect millions today, despite the fact that 50 years have passed since Agent Orange was used in Vietnam by the United States. For more background, we turn to our first report.
About 3 million Americans served in the armed forces in Vietnam during the 1960s and the early 1970s. At that time, the military used large amounts of mixtures known as defoliants, which were chemicals sprayed on plants to cause its leaves to fall off. One of these defoliants was Agent Orange, and many troops were exposed to it. Several years later, questions about the lasting health effects of those exposures, including marked increases in cancer risk, were still unanswered. It is called Agent Orange because of the orange band that identified the barrel that contained the chemical. There additionally were agents purple, green, and pink. Herbicides were developed to be deployed in enemy areas to defoliate dense jungles that provided cover for the North Vietnamese army. More than 5 million acres of jungle and forest were destroyed when troops deployed Agent Orange. Approximately 24 million gallons of herbicides were used in Vietnam between 1962 and 1971. Exposure to Agent Orange varied a great deal. Most of the large-scale spraying operations were carried out via airplane and helicopter. However, several herbicides were sprayed from boats or trucks, and some were even applied by soldiers with backpack sprayers. 50 years after its planes first sprayed the defoliant Agent Orange over Vietnam's jungle to destroy enemy cover, the U.S. has embarked on a landmark project to clean up a dangerous chemical that was left behind. The effort is seen as a long overdue step to remove a diplomatic thorn between the two countries, ensuing nearly 4 decades after the Vietnam War ended. The U.S. has given about $60 million for environmental restoration and social services since 2007, but this is its first direct involvement in cleaning up the herbicide, which has seeped into Vietnam's soil and watersheds for generations.
So today we have with us in the studio to discuss this issue Mr. Ayman Iskandarani, an environmental and ecological researcher. So first of all, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
So if we start with a kind of general question, what can you tell us about Agent Orange and the effects that it has on human health?
Agent Orange is a pesticide. It's like any other defoliant. It was part of the rainbow pesticides used to defoliate Vietnam in order to, in general,
to make it easier
for for the discovery of guerrilla teams and stuff like that. But it's also used in America and in other countries at the time to decrease the weed spread around hospitals, around places like the radar stations and stuff like this. Its effect on human health was discovered later on, like 10 years later or so. It was discovered to create birth defects, cancer, many sorts of diseases, and it's generally due to its seepage to the soil and to the underground water tables of the places they're sprayed on.
So you think that basically the companies that created this Agent Orange chemical, they weren't aware of the possible
The
consequences?
dioxin that created the problem was not part of the basic structure of of Agent Orange. It was due to overheating of the mixture in order, which created another toxic dioxin.
That was unexpected.
That was unexpected. Studies have shown that these dioxins, although they affect plants really quickly, their effect on humans, birds, and other sorts of animals did not show till later years. I think.
Do you think the Americans were aware of this in the first place?
I don't think
Not at all.
anyone was aware of it at the first place, but spraying that much pesticides and herbicides in one place does mean harm. You cannot defoliate a forest and expect it to grow overnight. It was meant as a de-urbanization plan or scheme to move the agricultural community from its place and allocate it to the cities that are controlled by the Americans. So I doubt that they didn't have any information about it. They did have, but not that much.
Maybe they weren't aware of the extent of the effect that this would
that's
have.
right. The effects have lasted 50 years till now and are expected to last many years after that.
Do you think the Americans can do anything to kind of close this dark page in their history?
There are troubles that we create to nature that cannot be fixed right away. You'd have to excavate the whole country and flip it up.
In terms of the ecological consequences?
The ecological damage cannot be
fixed. It can't be undone.
Undone or fixed. It can be minimized by the solutions that are created, pumping other chemicals that will balance the thing, the issue, or using other, discovering which water tables are infected or are highly infected and not using them. But you'd have to wait on nature to fix itself.
So do you think that there is any sort of compensation that can be offered that can fix this in a sense, at least with the people?
I guess
maybe if not with
the financial compensation and the medical compensation they're trying to create is good enough till now. Nothing more can be done at this late stage. It should have been done as the thing was as the herbicide was sprayed. They should have stopped it. It's around 76 million gallons. It's not a light number.
Okay, we'll be off to join our guest by Skype, who is Mr. Len Aldis, a secretary at the Britain-Vietnam Friendship. So thank you for being here with us today. Mr. Aldis, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So in what other wartime circumstances was Agent Orange utilized in the first place? Can you tell us more about that?
Well, can I begin by saying that it was used in Vietnam over a 10-year period, from 1961 to 1971, in the southern part of Vietnam, as you said earlier on, to expose the Vietnamese that were opposed to the American forces being in Vietnam. And so they used 80 million litres of this Agent Orange, which contained, as had been said, dioxin, the most poisonous substance known to mankind. Now it also has to be said that we in Britain also used Agent Orange in Malaya, when the Malayan people, after the Second World War, were fighting for their freedom and independence. And again, just as in Vietnam, to expose the people of Malaya in the jungles, we used Agent Orange to destroy the forest. And we invited the Americans to view what we have done. And so forth, they gathered much information from our use of it. So I have to say quite clearly that my country was deeply involved in Agent Orange, although it was used on Malaysia.
If I ask you the same sort of question that I asked Mr. Ayman previously, do you think that there is any sort of compensation that can make up for what happened?
Compensation has been one of the very sore points over the years. The American companies, headed by Monsanto, still refuse today to accept responsibility or make any payment whatsoever.
Okay, there seems to be a problem with the connection. We'll be back to our guest in the studio, Mr. Ayman. Can you tell us more about this idea of possibly fixing what has been going on in terms of at least the relations between the United States and the Vietnam government? Do you think it would be possible at all? Do you think it's starting in a sense?
I think it's more political than fixing what's going on ecologically,
environmentally.
The environmental damage that happened. It can create a sort of bond between the two people. In terms of just knowing the extent of the shared damage, because there are the Vietnamese veterans that served in Vietnam that are damaged out of these. There are multiple associations that take care of them in the United States. So the states have acknowledged that they did a mistake and that they're trying to fix it in their homeland.
Do you think that's enough, though?
No. It's not enough to fix something by basically what they're doing is just stitching the wound.
Maybe they could be creating more organizations, involving themselves more in the country.
There are social engagement is a big part, and it's being done. But governmental acknowledgement of the problem is still minimal if we refer to the scale of the problem. They have affected 4 or 5 generations that have been defaced by this agent. I guess compensation should be larger.
And how many more generations do you think will continue to be affected by this?
I guess the 50 more years will tell.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll be off for a short break, but stay tuned.
The crisis of capitalism, the European impasse, the energy shortages, the emerging power of Asia, the economic power of the Arab world, the economic debate, informative, revealing, and progressive. It discusses the economic event of the world.
Economic debate, where the numbers reveal the truth.
Welcome back. So before we continue our discussion, let's take a look at the second report and then we'll be back.
The Vietnam Red Cross estimated that more than 3 million people have suffered due to exposure to Agent Orange. It has been affecting 3 generations since, and researchers are still skeptical as to how many more generations will be affected. Many people in Vietnam still continue to suffer from a variety of health problems due to exposure to Agent Orange and dioxin, with some passing down to their children a potential of health complications. The chemical has been shown to cause serious skin diseases, as well as a vast variety of cancers of the lungs, larynx, and prostate. Other effects include cleft palate, mental disabilities, hernias, and extra fingers and toes. The more dangerous impact is that the disease and deformities caused by the chemical can span across generations. Perhaps no nation has been decimated since Vietnam as Iraq. The United Nations has recently discovered over 40 sites across Iraq that are contaminated with high levels of nuclear radiation and dioxins, known as the main component of Agent Orange. Areas near Iraq's largest towns, including Najaf, Basra, and Fallujah, which also accounts for nearly 25% of all found sites, are areas that have seen massive jumps in birth defects and cancer victims within the last 5 years. The increased prevalence of birth defects, with soaring rates including that of 12.36 per 1,000 births reported from Baghdad, Iraq in 2007, is largely attributed to exposure to depleted uranium used in over 30 years of war. Furthermore, 10 out of the 42 sites, which were former nuclear reactors or nuclear test sites, have profoundly high levels of nuclear reactivity. Dioxin levels are also found to be alarmingly high in agricultural area lands where the poor are forced to earn a living off contaminated land, plants, and water. While the U.S. military has acknowledged the illegal use of white phosphorus in Fallujah, it is widely believed that the whole range of new experimental weapons were tested there, the results of which are largely unknown, though the symptoms of foul play have made themselves known.
So back to Mr. Aldis. Can you tell us about Agent Orange and the Parkinson's disease and whether there's a consistent link between the exposure to Agent Orange and this disease?
Well, I've been going to Vietnam. My first visit was in March 1989, and I've been going back since. I've made 35 visits, and each of those visits I've been and saw, met and spoken to many of the Vietnamese affected by Agent Orange. And it really is very disturbing to see, especially when you're seeing children who were born many, many years after the war ended in 1975.
They're still being affected by this.
Oh, absolutely, because the children that I have seen are missing a leg, a limb, maybe two limbs, eyes, and so forth. And so they need tremendous amount of international help. Vietnam alone cannot do it by itself. The figure is too large, over 3 million. It needs international help and support. And if I may, I can tell you that what is needed are the homes, houses, clinics, small hospitals, and medical equipment, crutches, wheelchairs, and things like that. Because the third generation is already with us, and I fear very much that in a few months' time, we will be entering the fourth generation. And how many more generations, we do not know.
Is there enough public awareness about this in, say, Britain or the United States to kind of make a difference in any sense?
Well, the point is, you see, with the Americans, those who serve there, some of those are also affected, and they are having the same issues as the Vietnamese are, as are the Australians and the New Zealand people who served in Vietnam during the war, because they were also affected by that. It really is a human disaster, you know, and it's going to take years to see some kind of recovery. It can never be cleaned from the body of the person. You can maybe remove the soil, as they are beginning to do in Da Nang, which was a former US base where the planes were landed, loaded with Agent Orange, went off to spray, came back, and then washed out with water, which ran into the soil and to the nearby Sen Lake. And that settled in to the bodies of the fish in the fatty part. So it's there, and it will continue to be there, as it will be in the fatty part of the human body.
So how exactly is a condition added to the Veterans Affairs list of presumptive disorders?
Well, it affects people in many ways, mentally and physically. And that is why it is a tremendous problem for the people of Vietnam, for the medical people of Vietnam, to try and do whatever help they can to make life easier for the people that are so badly affected.
Do you find that many generations of Vietnamese will still continue to suffer from Agent Orange? And if so, how many?
How many people in Vietnam?
Or generations, if we continue to look forward into the future?
Well, it could be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 generations. It really is an unknown factor, because I say it's over 3 million now, and babies are still being born today as we speak.
And so can you please tell us more about the mission of your organization specifically?
Well, one of the things that my organization is doing, which I set up in 1992, is to raise money from my friends and supporters here in the UK, and we sent it out to the Vietnam Red Cross. And they, in turn, pass it down to the various clinics, hospitals, and we buy wheelchairs, crutches, and things like that. We're very small, only a couple of hundred, but the problem is massive.
Do you find that it's been effective so far?
And that is why we say international help and support is badly needed for Vietnam. Compensation. We have argued for years with the chemical companies, 37, who in 2004 were taken to court in the United States by the people of Vietnam to sue them, to try and get compensations. They were rejected. The Supreme Court also rejected, but had nothing to do with the Vietnamese appeal. Right? And so what has happened? With nearly or over 3 million people, they need tremendous amount of help, and they have been given not 1 cent in compensation. Not 1 cent. Monsanto and Dow Chemical are two of the leading companies that manufactured Agent Orange. They refuse today to accept responsibility or make any payment to the victims. The American government is only paying $60 million in order for the cleanup of just one American base at Da Nang. And there are many other hot spots, as they are described, where the soil is heavily contaminated and you just cannot go near it or on it. And that is the size of the problem.
Thank you very much, Mr. Len Aldis. We'll be going back to our guest in the studio, Mr. Ayman Iskandarani. So to start with talking about the kind of ecological impact, to kind of sum this up, what sort of ecological impact does Agent Orange have on, say, the forests of Vietnam?
Let's view it this way. Some places were sprayed up to 11 times with over 76 million gallons of herbicide that defoliated lots of trees, that created damage to the, let's call it the external cover. These sprayings seeped, like Mr.
Len Aldis.
Like Mr. Len Aldis said, these chemicals seeped into the lower layers of the land and are absorbed by the soil over and over. When the Vietnamese tried to plant trees, replant these places, they reused the same chemicals. So they created more spread of the dioxin in their food, and its seepage to the water created more damage. Reuse over and over of these materials will increase the damage. Ecologically speaking, every tree planted in an untreated area, which have its roots reach the lower water tables, will be affected by these chemicals. How the extent of the effect is still undiscovered, and it is hard to discover because day by day it creates mutations. It creates mutations in the animals and the fish, the water, the plants.
So this would continue to affect the people as well, not only the environmental kind of the forest.
The cycle is as follows: the people will use nature's products as animals to feed and stuff like that. They will be damaged. The damage that's created in the human population will create more mutation in generations to come, which will be it's a closed cycle. It's a closed cycle. Generation by generation. As I told you, it will not be resolved till nature fixes itself.
So there's no other way for kind of the governments to make a difference?
Extracting damaged soil and replacing it with other kinds of soil is effective, but on a very short term, and up to very low percentages. Because what we're talking about has seeped way deep into the ground. It has become a part of the nature, and till it's fixed, or till the mutations reach their highest level, the issue will be resolved. I saw
In the report?
the report spoke about Iraq and the nuclear damage in Iraq. Damages like these will not show their effect right away. The greater damage that's shown now is nothing compared to
What will come later on.
future generations will feel. And I think that's what the US has to compensate about, not just financial restitution or
But actually
just
making a difference.
creating
in
NGOs.
The environment. perhaps.
Creating a difference can become a fact by stopping wars, at least.
As the kind of beginning.
Stopping the reasons those toxic elements were thrown for at the first place.
Thank you very much. So thanks to our guests in the studio, Mr. Ayman Iskandarani, and our guest by Skype, Mr. Aldis. Thanks to you for watching. This was Eco-Terrorism, and I'm Zeinab Bailoun. See you next week.